Everybody wants to live in a world filled with good people. For those who strive to be good, being surrounded by other good people just makes their life better. And for those who are not good, those who we might even call evil, the predators among us, well, having a world full of good people provides ample prey and the best chance that they'll get away with whatever it is that they're getting away with. And for millennia, thinkers and different societies, different cultures have tried to figure out a system by which the people living within that society could live good lives and be good people. Every religion has their rules, their commandments. Every philosophy has the tenets to live by. And every society, every government has laws. And the expectation is that if one were to follow all of those rules, then one could be considered to be good. In the society that we have today, the multicultural society that we have, this creates a problem. Or at the very least, it creates an issue. Because if there is no objective way to know if one's behavior is good or bad, because in this culture, such behavior is accepted and good, and in this culture, that same behavior is considered bad. It puts us in a situation where we've come to think of that good and bad behavior, which in this case we're going to call moral and ethical for being good, and immoral and or unethical for being bad. We've come to think of that as completely subjective, as completely determined by person, place, and time. Now that's a real issue if we start to talk about a stateless society. Because for those who support the state, one of their greatest arguments, and within that framework of a subjective morality, it makes a lot of sense. They say, well, without the state to be that final arbiter, people will just run wild. And there'll be so much disagreement among others. It's a valid point. If we were dealing with thousands of years ago, which is where most of these systems of ethics or morality come from, whether it's a religious basis, whether it's a basis in something like European common law, which is thousands of years old, or at least 1,000 years old. Oh, whether it's traditions of certain cultures that stretch back also millennia. All of these things and a system of ethics, a system of morals, really the shift that we need to take is, like government, like religion, which these systems come out of and form the framework of, the system, the moral and ethical system that one lives by is a technology. And like all technologies that are allowed to have some inquiry into them, this technology has evolved. Philosophers have been, you might say, obsessed with the idea of morals and ethics since philosophy began in ancient Greece. And the introspection and discussion on the topic has not stopped. And so in this video, I want to share with you one of the most powerful things that I have learned probably in my entire life. And that is how to determine if behavior is ethical or moral. And moreover, a system, almost scientific, but certainly logical, whereby if one follows it, you can be a good person, regardless of your religion, your culture, the place that you live. This is universal. And the place where I first heard this described was, appropriately, in a work called Universally Preferable Behavior, written by Stéphane Molyneux, who is a philosopher, probably today's premier anarchist philosopher. Unfortunately, in recent years, he has turned into a bit of a, may want to say demagogue, and now he really embraces the alt-right. But when I first discovered him, he was writing specifically about anarchism. And this is a book. I will put a link to it if you want some further inquiry after I give you basically the synopsis and the basic tools. This is a book that the subtitle is, I believe it's a proof for secular ethics. It's a framework. It's a framework for ethics outside of religion, because the author happens to be an atheist. And it's also outside of government laws. So basically, the first thing that we need to cover is, what are ethics and what are morals? If you were to go out on the street, or even your family around you, and you were to ask them, you'd get as many different answers as there are people. And what you would really gain from that is that virtually no one knows what these words mean. You know, we talk about business ethics, medical ethics, but people don't know what these mean. And I think that it's silly to expect people to act ethically and act morally when they don't even know what the word means. So I'm going to give you a little rundown. And this is incredibly valuable. I think if we were to teach our children anything, that this is it. And what you will gain at the end of this, as you start looking at your life and looking at your actions, what happened for me is you will necessarily see that the state is unethical and immoral. But you will have the tools to really understand why that is. So first, let me define moral behavior versus ethical behavior. We'll start with ethical behavior. Ethical behavior is essentially, in a nutshell, sticking by and living up to your agreements. So this is, if you agree to something, if you contractually say that you're going to do something, you do it. That's ethical. Now, in a grander sense, that doesn't necessarily have to be just an agreement between you and another person. It could also be a societal norm. That you, by participating in a particular act, it's like not, if you're going to go to church and sit in there, you don't get up and disrupt the priest. Right? One might see that as being unethical. If you went there with the intention of disrupting these individuals' worship, of going in there under the false pretenses, because if they had known, if you had said, look, tomorrow I'm going to go and I'm going to stand up at that church and I'm going to disrupt you, they probably would have prevented you from entering the church, which is in many ways their right. Now, whether I'm an atheist, so I don't support what they're doing, but the other thing about it is it's not ethical for them to say, interrupt me at dinner, because that's part of the sort of agreement that we make, that we're participating in when we go out to a restaurant, to try to proselytize to me. But there may be some other places where that's appropriate. If I'm sitting around in a public park, for instance, and they strike up a conversation, that wouldn't necessarily be unethical. And then morality is sort of a subset of that. But morality is a little bit more serious. Morality is dealing with those things which are universally bad, or universally considered, but with the things that go beyond culture. So, for instance, this is things like murder, theft, rape. They kind of all go down to the respect of the body of an individual, and through the body, the property of an individual. These are things where there was no real agreement made, but you just, came up and you punched somebody in the face for no reason. That's immoral. Or a serial killer going out and killing innocent people. That's immoral. But how do we judge? And that's where this system, which I find brilliant, universally preferable behavior, comes in. Let's talk about the word preferable, because that's the key. So you got three different things. Universally, meaning everybody. Preferable, which we'll get to. Behavior. Okay, self-explanatory. That's actually the system. Universally preferable behavior. If you understand those three words, you can figure out if an act is ethical and moral. Really awesome. So in terms of preferable, this is not preferred, because that's what the sort of subjective view of ethics says. The subjective view of ethics says, well, we can't really say what's ethical or what's moral because different people want to do different things. So for instance, nothing is universally preferred. No behavior is universally preferred. We know that thieves like to steal. They prefer to steal. That's what makes them a thief. They prefer to steal rather than to leave the property unstolen. They prefer to take from other people without their consent rather than only and exclusively waiting until someone has given their consent, they're okay, before they take the property as their own. So that's preferred. So we could say that respecting the property of others and not stealing it is not universally preferred, because we know that there are thieves. We know that there are kleptomaniacs. But preferable is something completely different. And it's to say this: universally preferable means, could a certain behavior be preferred by everyone all the time? So let's go with the stealing. If stealing was universally preferable, then the thief would have to simultaneously prefer to steal and also prefer to be stolen from. Because the thief, while he wants to steal from another person, doesn't want his own property to be stolen. Well, what would be the point of stealing someone else's property if you were like, well, as soon as I steal this, I hope that someone else steals it from me? It's sort of self-defeating. But the converse, respecting the property of others, that is actually universally preferable. Every single person on the planet can prefer and say, I don't want to steal anybody else's property and I don't want my property stolen. Every person can prefer it. This makes it good. This makes it ethical. Let's go, this makes it moral for the theft as well. Let's go with murder. Right? Let's say a serial killer. The serial killer wants to kill. He prefers to kill, or she, but the serial killer doesn't want to simultaneously be the victim of a serial killer, doesn't want to be murdered. The serial killer wants to stay alive. But not murdering others is universally preferable. Everyone on the planet, at every time, can all simultaneously say, I neither want to murder nor be murdered. It's very logical. That means murder, killing another person, an innocent individual, that is immoral. That cannot be universally preferable. But not murdering is universally preferable, therefore it is a moral behavior. How about keeping your agreements in a contract? If I enter into a contract, I want the other side to keep their agreement. I don't simultaneously want to break the agreement and have them break the agreement. What would be the point of making the agreement? It's no rational sense. When we make an agreement, we want the other party, we prefer the other party to keep their agreement, And universally, every single person at the same time can prefer, I prefer to keep my end of the bargain, and I prefer that they keep theirs. And as a matter of fact, that's how most business takes place. When it's good and when it continues on. So this gives us a very powerful framework. And like I said, I think that's enough of an intro. If you really want to go into this, the link is there. And I think it's if you read one book, this one changed my life because it really gave me, I felt so much more empowered in my own life to be able to be a good person. And with that little bit of knowledge, when I am about to take an action, I'm able to run it through that little process, run it through that little algorithm. And then at least if I'm going to take that action and that action is unethical, I really don't take immoral actions, but if I'm even considering to take an unethical stand or have an unethical behavior, then I have to take full responsibility because I knew I was being unethical. It's not a mistake. Don't we wish that we could get that from our politicians? But most politicians have no clue about ethics. That's how they're able to rise to the place that they are. Relative sociopaths. Now, why is this a powerful tool and a powerful technology? Once you have it, once you have some idea of how you can be a good person, how you can make decisions that are ethical and moral, that are completely outside of culture, outside of anything. As you walk through your day, you can make these decisions internally. Why is this important? First reason it's important, from the standpoint of the discussion of anarchism versus statism, well, the state itself is defined as having a monopoly on the use of violent coercive force in a particular geographical area. Well, the use of violent coercive force, particularly the initiation of the use of violent coercive force, we know this if we look at our universally preferable behavior. So if I want to violently make somebody do what I want them to do, coerce them into doing something. So for instance, I want to coerce them into giving me their wallet with violence. I can't simultaneously prefer that another person with a bigger gun is simultaneously having me give them their wallet. And since the state has a monopoly on the ability to do that, and that's actually the definition of the state, to have a monopoly automatically means you're acknowledging that it's not universally preferable. Because if it was universally preferable, there's no monopoly. Everybody can do it, right? There's no monopoly on being kind to each other. We wouldn't set up a system where we said there's only one individual or one group of people in this geographical area that can be kind to children or that can be kind to one another. Everybody else has to be assholes, be asinine, right? But that monopoly on immoral behavior, it tells you all that you need to know to break it right apart. And furthermore, this technology is powerful because the thing about ethical and moral behavior is the trade-off. When you are behaving as an ethical person, well, let's start with this. Unethical behavior, not keeping your word in a contract, stealing, fraud, lying. All of these things give short-term gain with long-term pain. You get a small short-term gain, but long-term, like for instance, not keeping your agreement in contracts. If those contracts are a loan, well, what happens if you don't pay back loans? Short-term, you keep some money. Long-term, bad credit. And that bad credit prevents you from doing a series of things. The reverse being, if you do pay back the loan, your credit is good. And this is carried through on an almost spiritual level. If people know you as a good person who keeps their word, who can be trusted, people will want to be around you. People will want to work with you. People will want to help you. But if you're known as somebody who is unethical or immoral, while you got those short-term gains, when you need it, when it comes around, there's going to be nobody there. And we all know people who are like that. That person you just can't trust. That person you would never loan $1 to because you know you'd never get it paid back. So it's a powerful technology for reaping long-term benefits in your whole entire life. And not falling into a pitfall where you make a decision in the moment because you think, oh, this is a good decision right now. This allows you to see, oh, but I know it's unethical, so I know that long term I'm going to suffer because of this decision. And the more of them that there are, the more that they add up to what it's going to be in the long term. And this plays itself out. And if you're a Christian, you're probably seeing that what I'm describing is what's called the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The basics are right there, but it's a technology. It's not just a saying. And here's the understanding. The understanding is when people ask, how do we live without a state? How do we bring in a stateless society? Well, the first way to get people to desire a stateless society is to teach them ethics, to allow them to live ethical lives. Because the people who don't want a state, the people most vehemently against the state, are those people who most value ethics and morals. And when society has grown enough to where the majority of people, or at least a tipping point, a critical mass of people, have a great enough understanding and practice being ethical and being moral, then with the state gone, the greatest engine of immorality, what's left is a society of good people. Now, being inside of the state as a good person, as an ethical person, as a moral person, is frustrating. But it's better than being anywhere with the consequences and life outcomes that come from being a bad person, from living an immoral and unethical life. The greatest gift that you can give those that you know, the greatest gift that you can give your children if you're a parent, is to teach them this and to keep walking them through it. And while they're young, to talk to them about their actions and ask them, well, we know what unethical and immoral is. Was that ethical? Was that moral? Be that little voice in their head and change the world.